Okay, so in this slide, we're looking at deductive approach versus an inductive approach. So when you are doing your pain point analysis, do you start with the theory? Do you start with those UX design principles and then build a hypothesis, then go and make your observations about the web page? And then actually confirm or reject that theory for your pain point. So in the case of the Amity website, we would be looking at that and saying, all right, do we have a UX principle in mind? So for example, navigation. All right, simplicity in navigation. It might be that we have, say, the 3-click rule. We want to be able to get from the home page to the MBA information page in 3 clicks or less. So we're starting from that theory and then taking a look at the website to see whether or not we can observe that process being made. And if not, are we going to then confirm that pain point? The inductive approach, however, it would be to start and look at the website, go around, try different navigation elements of it, set the task then. Okay, you're making the observation. You decide then the pattern. You're saying, okay, let's look at that task of going to the MBA, and then our hypothesis. Is it possible to make some modifications for this in order to be able to meet the theory? And the final theory would be the UX 3-click rule. So this is one way we're looking at it. So it's difficult sometimes for people to understand these different ways of approaching the overall problem. So this is an example. Imagine that you've lost your binder, your folder, and you're saying, where did it go? All right, so the scenario is that you had the folder when you got up in the morning, you went on the bus, and then when you got to work or to school, you realized that you didn't have that anymore. So you're trying to figure out, you're trying to come up with a conclusion about what happened to that. Well, in a deductive approach, you would say, I remember I had it on the bus coming home. So it's not at school, it's either on the bus or it's at home. So here, you're starting with that theory, and then you're going to be coming up to your conclusion. Whereas the inductive approach is slightly different. Here you're saying, I've already left my binder on the bus 5 times this year, so I probably left it on the bus. All right, so you can see the difference in the way you're thinking about the same problem between deductive, starting with theory, and inductive, starting with that observation. Let's do a quick a little example here. Look at these numbers. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and then what? So pause the video and think about this sequence of numbers. What would you say would go into the question marks? What numbers would go into the question marks? So pause the video, make a note of that, and then come back. All right, so there's not one single solution to this. What we're doing is we're looking at this problem, and we're identifying the information, and then we are trying to establish a pattern or a math formula or a model. And based on that, we would have a conclusion. Now, there's not to say that there's any one only correct solution in this. If we were to say 1, 1, or 11, or 2, 2, 22, or 3, 3, 33, if we were to say that from 11, we add 11 more, that makes 22, and we add 11 more, that makes 33, then if we add 11 more, it makes 44. So it could be that we're saying our formula is x plus 11, all right? But it's not the only one. It's not the only way you could go. What if you were to say, instead of adding 11, we have 11 in the first, and then we have 22 in the second. Well, how do you get to 33? Well, it could be that you add the first and the second. So if we add the first and the second, that brings us to 33. So if we were to add the first and the next, would that be 55? Or can you think of another pattern, another model that would give us a solution? So again, when we're approaching this UX dilemma, there's not one correct answer that is definitive. We need to be able to look at our patterns and then justify. All right, let's go on to developing our prototype then. Here we go. If we look in the last column now, we're going to be following the similar type of logic. We're going to be starting off and saying, well, what's our starting place? Well, for our sample solution, our intervention, our prototype, we might start with what we call wireframe. So there are different levels of sophistication of the quality. If we say it's low fidelity, then that means it might just be a sketch or stick drawing. Or it could be just a very sketchy storyboard. If we're saying that it's high fidelity, and then we're going to be going into doing an interactive prototype, all right, well then it might be that you're using some sophisticated software that we'll be talking more about, such as Figma and Miro, etc. The themes are going to be consistent. So if you're starting with navigation, stay with navigation. In our case with Amity, we use navigation. We want to be consistent. And here we're talking about the desk research. We want to be able to, for our prototype, to cross-reference and compare. So if you have some information either from your desk research, your literature review, we want to make sure that you're able to look at that in your prototype and then use that as evidence for your choices. Going on, we're same thing as with the commercial research. You're looking and you're saying, okay, we want to compare that initial data to the actual prototype itself. And when we are using that persona information, we want to bring that over. We've established these are the user's needs, 1, 2, and 3. We can then demonstrate in our prototype how those needs are being adjusted. When we're looking at the standards, okay, again, we want to be consistent. We want to make sure that our prototype solution meets any of the regulations or guidelines which are appropriate for that particular type of intervention. Now, for UX design, you want to be looking at your test choices. We want to be able to provide the evidence to show why we have made that particular test. So if you're doing something with user-centered, then it might be that that test choice that you're doing is focusing on a qualitative data. If you're doing a task-centered, it might be that your tests are looking at more quantitative data. Very important point now to draw in from our UX principles is the criteria. One of the main questions that we need to ask is, what are you going to do in terms of measuring that prototype? Are you measuring how usable it is? Are you measuring the accessibility of that prototype? Are you measuring the learnability? Are you measuring satisfaction? Are you measuring error handling? Or are you measuring consistency? Or perhaps the emotional aspect of the prototype? I recommend that if you have more than one criteria, that you do separate tests. Don't combine too many criteria in one test. If, for example, you're doing the survey and you're doing the testing, say, for example, A/B testing. A, here is the original. Now we're going to compare it to B, the revised design. Then make sure you categorize, you separate your questions for this criteria. So you have questions in section A about usability, and section B might be about satisfaction. All right, we're finishing off now our video with a set of resources. There's a number of steps that you're going through for your UX project. This is a project. I highly recommend you get a projectmanagement.com free account. There's a number of different resources in there, from Gantt charts to various project videos that will be able to help you. There are free online generators. So if you do a search, you might find, for example, here about making Gantt charts or mind maps. These are also very useful. Another variation on the mind map is the rich picture, and so you might be making this soft systems methodology diagram from Peter Checklin, and that is an excellent tool. As you saw in our sample with Amity University website, we have the sitemap generator. There are a number of different tools that will either create table of contents, text type mind maps, or more flowchart type of, sitemaps. And then flowcharts. This is another resource that you can take a look at that will help you in terms of putting together a flow of the actions that are going through, and that will relate to your hierarchical task analysis. We've got the wireframe and prototype resources as well. Figma we mentioned earlier in the video. There's a small video to walk through on that. For the plugin to capture the website, makes it much easier. We've got testing a tool called Maze, which has a number of free templates. And then in terms of the methodology, we've got tools like Miro, and then there you'll see a number of community and news resources like Medium and the Jacob Nielsen group. And finishing off then, we've got some resources here with respect to your academic skills, making sure that any claims or any statements that you're putting forward, you link that to supporting evidence, to references, show the source of that information. Especially if there's intellectual property rights involved with that, you want to make sure that you're following any type of legal restrictions that can be involved with that. Analytics are a number of tools that you can use, but have a look at the developer for Chrome, for Google Lighthouse. I recommend that. And then we've got regulations and standards as well that you should be aware of. One thing that hasn't been added to this yet would be artificial intelligence. So if you're using ChatGPT or any of the other AI generators to make images, say for example to have a fake image of a user persona, of a person that's not a real person. These AI tools are very valuable. Make sure that you're referencing them as you go along. So, in conclusion, there's no single methodology or set of tools to identify the system or software pain point, or to develop the test and test your wireframe and prototypes. So this toolkit is aiming at trying to give you that overview of the whole process. Please do feel free to email me if you have any questions.